Welcome to In the Flow, where we dive into how marketing leaders use operations to cut through the chaos and seize opportunity. Today's guest is Anil Noorani, founder and managing partner at TKM Consultants, a growth consultancy working alongside ambitious brands, agencies, SMEs, and tech companies, implementing marketing strategy and operational models to meet revenue and growth targets. Anil and I have known each other for about 20 years now. Back then, we used to look at people in their 40s and wonder, what do they know? Well, here we are, and it's been a pleasure to watch Anil grow his business after our stint together at Activity in 2007 to 2009. Anil, thank you for joining the pod. As I said, we've known each other for quite some time now, but for the audience, it'd be just great, a bit of a background. What do you do, and sort of how you got to where you are today.
Wonderful. And so first of all, it's wonderful to have been invited onto your podcast, Anthony. It's great to see you as always. And, full disclosure for the audience, Anthony's one of my favorite people in the industry. We have known each other for a very long time. We've worked together in various companies and various guises, and it's always an absolute privilege to see how him and his team have developed over time and actually being real pioneers in the sort of software landscape that I also play in the MarTech world. So yeah, Anthony, great to be
Brilliant.
here.
Thanks,
Thank
Anil.
you. I've been in the sort of creative operations, marketing tech space pretty much my entire career. I started off as a software developer, very quickly realized there were a lot of people that were much better at that than I was. So I wanted to work more on the client facing side of things. I really cut my teeth and started my career in this environment at a company called Seven Worldwide, where we actually first met. And
Yeah,
at
that's
the
right.
time, that was, long day, you say, over 20 years
I
ago
know
now. And
it's
that was,
feels so long
well,
ago.
yeah, it was mad. I remember you presenting to me or demoing some software when the internet had just started.
Oh man, it must have been a
And
terrible demo. It's like 20 years
I
ago.
think we might have bought the software actually. But
I think you did.
that was a wonderful experience for me. It was 6 years I was there. And it's where I really got involved in two areas, I'd say. I sort of headed up the solutions team. So that was really about using technology to enhance the ways of working, I suppose, around people that were creating content, producing content, approving content, and then the marketeers that were actually utilizing that content in campaigns. So there was a real technology-led side of the business. And then I also went over to India and set up at the time what was the first offshore production studio in Chennai, which was a really fascinating experience. And then from there I went into two tech startups, one of which I obviously worked with you at, and then set up TKM about 15 years ago to really help marketing teams, agencies sort of navigate their way around marketing excellence, marketing efficiency, content production models, etc. And I also now sit on the board of a company called We Are Amnet, which we started in 2018, which is one of the fastest growing offshore production studios, with studios in Chennai, Costa Rica, and teams in the UK and North America. So yeah, heavily involved in the space.
Yeah.
Really excited actually by what's coming up, and great to see obviously the sort of developments with Ziflow, and Ziflow is actually being used in many of the in-house agencies that I actually work with, both here and in North America. So that's also really encouraging.
That's great. Yeah, so you sort of mentioned the Seven Worldwide implementation with technology and across all these different pieces of the production lifecycle. If you will. I mean, that's sort of creative operations, if you will, without us ever calling it that back in the day. Did you have a name for it back then, or was it just you're the technology team?
Yeah, I know. It's a great question, actually. I do remember, I think everyone struggled with what to call it. And I definitely don't remember ever calling it creative operations. I think
Yeah, I know.
marketing operations sort of came first, which is sort of the
Yeah,
parent, I suppose, of creative ops in
yeah,
many ways, and that it spans the whole business. And organizations were just trying to figure out how to use these technologies. And even today, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, even today, companies are struggling with approvals, with digital asset management, with workflow solutions. They're still challenged by those areas. And, that's a lot of that is down to, how organizations are segmented and fragmented, ways of working, and managing change really, and bringing technology on in order to serve a purpose. And sometimes people forget, I think, about what the key objectives are of that technology and really only think about the technology. And that's where I think when I work with my clients, very much focus on the sort of the people side of the change more than the technology or the processes, which is probably what I used to focus on a little bit more when I was younger.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, I think I don't know if it's more nowadays than it was before, but maybe people are just tired of change. Yeah, there's some change fatigue, if you will, because SaaS sort of started when we met at first. It was
Yeah.
sort of the advent of SaaS, and now there's obviously like a million MarTech tools out there. And the one thing I run into quite a bit, with prospects and so on, is like, how are we going to roll this out? It's another tool, it's like, who's going to own it, etc.
Mm.
I do feel for teams. I mean, even when we implement software at Ziflow, it's a little bit like, okay, yeah, okay, we got to learn this tool, or we change a tool and so on. So yeah, I get it. Any ways that you sort of figure this out?
It's a cultural thing, I think. There's a great quote actually that I've used often. It was a privilege to actually see the CMO of NatWest Bank, National Westminster Bank, speaking once. And she said, basically, marketing departments are a graveyard of failed technology implementations. So then the question then for is why? You go through the
Yeah,
due diligence, you find the right technology, it ticks all the boxes, it's commercially viable, it has the right feature set. So then you start looking at the processes, okay, but then you change the processes, you bring a Six Sigma team in, or you use specialist consultants like us, who come in and actually look at those processes, but it still doesn't deliver the levels of adoption you would expect. So then you have to then look at the people, and the people side of the business, I think, is where, you really need to rally around. And I think for me, when you think about innovators and you think about early adopters, and if you can really bring those guys along on the journey with you, then the slightly later adopters will change suit. And when I think about change, there's sort of there's 4 stages of change, which I know you'll have come across as well. There's that denial phase, there's nothing wrong. You don't need
yeah,
anything. I mean, again, that's a people issue. We know there's something wrong, otherwise we won't be having a discussion. And if that prolongs, then you get into a period of status quo. That's very dangerous, of course. Then there's the fear of change. So I know there's something wrong, but I'm not yet going to commit to something. I don't want to yet change. And the problem with that is you hit an inflection point as a company, and especially in retail, where companies are moving their creative operations teams to be digital first. If you basically hit that inflection point and you're not ready for it, as a retailer especially, I think you will basically really struggle. And then if you get through the fear, then you move into acceptance of change. And this is where I think our industry is really fantastic. I think we're extremely good at exploring what's possible. And I think this is probably where we are with elements of AI, exploration, maybe even moving into utilization and practical adoption. And then finally, you commit to the change. And once you've committed to the change, then I think it's all down to people, the leadership and the culture. And if you can get those elements nailed down, you'll probably set yourself on the path to success. I think it was easier actually a few years ago when a lot of technology companies had professional services wrapped around them,
yeah.
to sort of assist you with that cultural change. But I think now it's a lot more difficult because of the way software companies have naturally they lean much more into the technology. And who knows,
Yeah,
maybe agentic AI will be the solution for us when we're
be the
trying to,
new onboarding teams. Yeah,
yeah, the cultural
it's
change.
a good
Yeah.
point. Yes, obviously people, process, tech, people are most important, because yeah, without the people, you can't get change done. Um, well, what I found is, starting with prefetch, even back in our activity days, I
Mm.
remember Patrick Kramer, when he introduced me to you, he was like, Anil's the rainmaker. And I was like, what does he mean? And then I was
Quite
like,
right.
okay, I get what he means. So just, I don't think I ever told you that, but you were definitely on the pedestal there when I met you. And it was great. But I remember at activity days, I mean, we had a lot of services wrapped around some of our sales and implementation, and service was a big component. As the years have gone by, Privici, we still had a lot of people who were willing to pay for services. They expected it. I'm finding a lot now when we sell a deal in Ziflow, we onboard a new customer, they want to reduce the services as much as possible. So there's pressure both ways. So you try and accommodate, but you're also like, well, to be successful, we want to handhold you through this process. It's ours, but it's sort of like this sort of two-way street, or it's like we have a customer that didn't want to pay for it and really struggling, and we just didn't go through that onboarding process. I, are you seeing this? I mean, you're obviously on the consulting side, so you're getting dragged in like when they really need you.
Yeah, I mean, I love to be dragged in,
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, the Waymaker thing, just to bring, I'm not going to bring this up because that was a lovely compliment, but I think technology companies have perhaps lost a little bit of trust, not because, and it isn't their fault, of course. It's down to the fault that there has been a number of implementations. Companies are onto their fourth or fifth version of DAM,
Yeah.
for example,
Good point.
and then they change the team and they're still doing the same things over and over again.
Yeah. And why is this one going to be better?
Yeah, this will be better. And actually, it's a great point you made. Companies, I think now, they want, immediate results. The return on investment pressure is quite significant. And we're seeing that even more now. There's more content being created. Therefore, we need more technology to enable that content development. We need more technology to develop scale and personalization. And we need to see the sales as a result of that. And therefore, the technology needs to pay for itself very quickly. And I think a lot of organizations feel that they have that ability to change or anchor that technology implementation in cultural change, when actually they don't necessarily have those skill sets. And it's interesting when my brother, he's an anthropologist, and he talks about like storytelling, and one thing
Yeah.
is, when we're deploying technology, the good thing about having a great story is the first thing you want to do is tell someone else. So, when you're bringing technology in, those stories, that behavior, that ability to illustrate, maybe even like corporate jealousy, like actually we're the best team, we've done this, here's some metrics to prove it. And it builds momentum. And I think that again is a leadership play that sometimes is lacking. Once the technology comes in, the leadership may just take a step back, but they need
Mm.
to be active in the delivery and visible at all times. And the internal communications need to come from them as well. And I think that's something that I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with. It becomes a very
Yeah.
operational discipline, but actually it needs to start at the top. And I'm
You need some
talking a
exec
marketing
leadership.
director.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I've seen
Mm.
the same thing. We sort of wonder why we don't talk to more CMOs, and CMOs aren't, implementing various tools and so on. But it's often the, management and sort of the ICs that own the implementation. But yeah, you need sponsorship from the top, because otherwise, again, getting everyone on board with a change, super hard if you don't, if the leader's not out there, on the front line, if you will.
There's a great model, if you indulge me for a moment.
Yeah, yeah,
I
go
was on
ahead.
a scaling up course, which was a Stanford-led course, and
Yeah.
they talked about this model that really stuck with me. It was basically the four pillars of business, and if you look at a technology implementation as like a microcosm of a business, so you have people, strategy, execution, and cash. And it's always in that order, right? People, strategy, execution, and cash. And when you're trying to figure something out, you basically lean into one of those four areas. I always lean into strategy. I'm a strategic consultant. I have been my entire career. So I naturally always think if something's not working or something's not being deployed effectively, it must be down to our strategy. Maybe we need to look at different, solutions. But actually, what this course taught me is it's always the thing to the left. So I always think it's a strategic problem, but it's generally down to the people. If you think it's down for people, it's probably because you don't have enough cash and you need to bring in the
Yeah.
support team, like you
Yeah,
just
yeah,
said.
yeah.
And if you
Good
think
point.
it's a commercial challenge, a cash challenge, it's probably down to the operation, the execution that you need to look at to free up the cash, to get the right people to deliver the strategy. And so it goes on. So now I've
Hmm.
recognized late on in my career, but actually it's not always about the strategy. Quite often I've got to look at the people side of a business and then maybe even the other two areas as well, to try and get something delivered effectively, especially from a technology perspective.
That's a great framework. I have to tell you, I mean, it's only consultants that are able to put something so sucsuccinctly together as a, problem solving. It's brilliant. Yeah. I never thought of
Well,
it that way.
it's a Stanford thing, so I can't take the credit, but
Well,
it's
you can still borrow.
yeah,
Yeah.
the scaling up courses that I did was excellent. And if
That's
anyone wants
brilliant.
to know, let me know and I'll put you in touch.
Fantastic. Anil, I actually want to go back. I mean, so we worked together 2007 to 2009-ish, and 2010 we both left Activity and did sort of our own things. What sort of triggered starting TKM? We were always like that. We sort of were in touch, lost touch, and there was a period where we
Mm,
sort of lost touch as I was working in Proof HQ and you were building TKM. I just wanted to know background. I mean, why start?
mm,
How did that come to? How did you get off the ground? That because that
yeah,
that I'm always intrigued about that. Like starting
yeah.
something from scratch.
So I'd been in that world of production, creative production, working with some great marketing teams and brands. Um, then I went obviously to Activity, which was all about raising finance and starting a business from scratch. So I'd gone from a very large production agency to a startup, to all intents and purposes. And then I went and worked with Brandmaster, which is now part of Paperfly. So, very successful digital asset management provider. And all those three different businesses taught me very different things. Seven was about globalization. I was working all over the world. Activity was about bootstrapping a company and actually moving through the phases of growth. And Brandmaster was about setting up a business that had fantastic capability in one territory but needed to expand. And what I felt was with a consulting practice, I think I'd got to a point where I wanted to solve problems, but I didn't necessarily want to be aligned to a single solution every time. And that allowed me to work. I was very lucky, I got a wonderful project with Lloyd's Bank right off the bat with a friend of mine that I worked with at Seven. And then I got very strategic projects with like the CEO of Royal Mail. And then it started to snowball. And yeah, that was fascinating. And I was working with very large brands and also very small companies. And I do a lot of work with UCL. So I'm inspired by sort of startup early stage businesses, especially tech companies. But that allowed me to sort of have this sort of philosophy, which was I wanted to work with interesting people, number one. That was non-negotiable. On
Yeah.
interesting projects, always in that order. So the people
Yeah.
were always going back
The
to people. It
people,
was always
yeah,
about the
okay.
people. On interesting projects and then commercial, but I was never looking to build a large volume of individuals. So I've got an incredible, wonderful network of consultants that we bring into projects depending on the requirement. And the reason, interestingly, that I sort of started to work so closely with We Are Amnet, that was the first company where I really got heavily involved with, which is they're an offshore production studio. It was partly because, I felt that they had such an amazing culture and integrity. The CEO is a wonderful guy. I really wanted to sort of explore how I could help them grow specifically. So there was an allegiance there. So I'm a strategic partner for that one organization. And maybe I'll look for a couple more. And I think the world has disappeared now where, you can't be aligned to anyone. I think we're a
Yeah.
lot more agile now, flexible as
Yeah, definitely.
organizations and consultants. So yeah, I wanted to problem solve, Anthony, is a short answer. And I wanted to work with fantastic people without having to worry too much about the commercial implication.
No, that's great. I mean, I always find it interesting, like starting something from scratch. I mean, you need a bit of luck, but it's also some of the luck you built up through your career, right? It's like the connections you made, the experience you gain, obviously, but it feels like it always comes back to people, right? It's like, you know, starting a business, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, look at our relationship. Most of
Yeah.
my relationships are. I don't want you not to feel special because you are, but most of my relationships are 20, 25 years old, and like I've retained
Yeah,
those, and I'm really proud of that. And actually, TKM's purpose. Um, I didn't know this is where the conversation was going to go, but I'm glad you brought it up now because TKM's purpose is to build long-lasting, mutually beneficial relationships. That's it. That's our one line. That's why we
that's
exist,
great.
and that sort of sits in the back of everything that we do.
I'm not sure if this is unique or, yeah, I'm sure others do it as well, but I could email new customers and just drop them an email saying welcome. But we got the drip email in Son. It just sometimes feels like, yeah, it's maybe not as personal but on LinkedIn, I will connect to every new customer
Mm,
and just welcome them and just thank them for joining Ziflow. And it just, for me, it's like at the end of the day, I mean, how many people do you in 10 years time or 20 years time come around and they remember you? And I think is that it's all a people business.
yeah, and I think as the CEO, I mean, you're in a privileged position. You've got an amazing team, great clients, and I think as the CEO, I put a lot of stock into the CEO in the same way I do with I'm a governor of three schools. I put a lot of stock into the heads of those schools. And the CEO is exactly the same. For me, they are the face of the company, the voice of the company, and everything. The total accountability of that organization sits with the CEO. And so those relationships that you're building with your customers in the way you just described, whether it's digitally through LinkedIn, which I think is an incredible platform for doing that, or whether, it's getting meeting for a lunch and breaking bread together when you're in London or New York or whatever. I think it's something that every CEO needs to really put at the top of their agenda, and not just externally with their customers, but also internally with their teams as well. And I was very lucky. I had some great leaders I've met who have mentored me through my career. And if you're 23 and 24 and the CEO just comes up to you and just has a coffee with you, it means the world. It means
That's
the
so
world.
true.
And, and you never lose that feeling. So whether you're the CEO of a brand who's actually deployed Ziflow or a 20-year-old intern, time with the CEO it will always mean a lot. You just may get more time with the intern than you might do with the CEO of, I don't know,
Yeah.
Coca-Cola or something.
It's just weird because you feel like, as you said, you're sort of on the receiving end of it and it means a lot. Whereas, now you get older, you go like, who wants to spend time with me? I'm like, seriously? I'm like, I don't, I don't want to be this uncool older guy.
But I don't think anyone sees it that way, do they? What they see is expertise and knowledge, and it's a chance to share. And the Royal Mail project, the CEO then, it was a lady called Moya Green. When I went to see her, I was amazed at how much investment of her time she put into what we had produced. It was incredible, extremely gratifying to see that. And I took a lot out of those interactions and those engagements. And I think the same applies now to anyone I work with. And I mentor on a UCL entrepreneur program where we get to spend time with these 22, 23-year-olds that are just building incredible things. And they don't realize that I get more out of them than they do out of me. They say,
Yeah.
"Oh, please, can you help us with this?" But actually, you want to be inspired by those young minds, and I think it does work both ways. But the role of the CEO is a tough one. It's lonely, and it's one that I think you need those moments where you're just spending time with people and actually sharing the knowledge, because
Yeah.
that's extremely gratifying for
Yeah. It's
both
as
of
they
us.
say, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. There's just nothing in between.
And the world is, again, I don't want to steal another one of my brother's lines, but he came up with this great line, which is, "Today's the slowest we'll ever be. Tomorrow will be faster, and the day after will be faster again." And it feels like that. We're working at breakneck speed. And, going back to creative operations, with all of your clients, I mean, these guys are under extreme pressure. And not just creative operations, but marketing operations as well, marketing directors. We're seeing, obviously, the evolution of AI, immersive content, virtual production, offshore studios. And it's trying to work out what this content ecosystem, which includes all the technology, needs to look like. I think, and that's why we need leadership teams and CEOs. Even if it's the CEO of a large brand, they should be involved with the creative operations decisions, because actually, at the end of the day, those in-house studios are just as important as the finance team or the
Yep.
HR team. They're in-house teams, right? And they are representing the brand, which, let's face it, on the balance sheet is the
Yeah.
most important thing. So it's the CEO and leadership involvement is critical for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The one thing I think about a lot is what gets attention. And the closer you are to revenue, I think, people will tend to gravitate towards that. Creative operations, marketing often is seen as a cost center. So the attributions can be super hard, right? And often feel like when you talk about creative operations, marketing operations, people see it just as a pure cost center. So it's like, okay, how do we make it more efficient? We have to do it because you don't market, you're not going to get business. But and if you more on the revenue side, it's like, yeah, there's just a lot more. It's closer to the ROI, if you will. And I think that's maybe sometimes it plays a part in it. I don't know.
Yeah, I
That's my
totally
feeling on it.
agree. But the thing is, I remember I was working with McDonald's as well, and I remember talking to the marketing director about, if we don't have any metrics, we won't have any success, or we can't illustrate success. And also, I did a piece of insight for the World Federation of Advertisers where we monitored what the ROI was on marketing campaigns, and it was down at sort of 17 to 20% of companies that were monitoring it. So
Mm.
those cost
Because it's
centers,
so
as you
hard.
described. It's
Yeah.
nothing, right? But, but
Yeah.
but those cost centers, those content creators, those producers of content, whose stakeholders are the marketing teams, have a responsibility to the company to illustrate the value that they're producing. How does this deliver sales? How does this deliver,
But I think it's
you know,
hard. It's actually super
it,
hard, I think.
it's
Yeah.
so it's so hard, but
Yeah.
it's critical.
Mm.
It's critical, and otherwise we're shooting bullets at the wall, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying to someone last week, when I was working with Johnson and Johnson at Seven. So this is going back, 20 years, and this is still totally relevant. The marketing director of Johnson and Johnson basically had worked out that by using technology, by using approval workflow solutions actually, and doing some of the production offshore, we were able to get the product to market one day early, which resulted in millions of dollars of additional sales. And that's what we rolled out. That was the
That's amazing.
proposition that we actually rolled out, not
Wow.
not the technology or where it was being done, or it was just that, because it was a revenue story. And I think if we can illustrate that revenue story, and actually, we produce this
That's right.
report
Yeah.
every year, this insight
Yeah.
report on, and this is all creative operations. This is the sixth year we've done it. And last year, Nordstrom were on the front of the cover, and they save hundreds of hours by doing stuff offshore, because their in-house team obviously needs to stay really creative and strategic, etc. So if we can then illustrate what the revenue return looks like, it's hugely advantageous. In-house teams, so the last thing I'll say as well, in-house teams, their cost centers, they're not even using wooden dollars. So it's very hard for them to illustrate the value. So they've got to show the campaign results. I think it's the only way going forward.
Okay. So you mentioned AI a little bit. You often talk about Martech's law. Now the first question I'm going to ask you on AI is, what is it going to look like for our kids? Mine are a little bit younger than yours. I think yours are about,
Yeah, 19 and
um,
17, yeah.
yeah, I finish up sort of, and they're studying. Mine's 12 and 6. And the one thing I wonder is, like, as we said, things are moving quicker and quicker. Is like, what is it going to look like for them one day? But you can
I
answer
mean,
that or answer the Martech AI question. Yeah.
I was at a conference last week, and someone asked the question, who uses Google to search and who uses ChatGPT
We are
or
seeing
one of
so many more referrals through ChatGPT now. It's
it's
unbelievable.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I pretty much stopped using Google, and or it's always the backup for me, which is weird, right? I mean, how's Google
Yeah.
suddenly become
Same.
like fairly irrelevant? And
I
this
know.
idea that search engine optimization, so content has been created, go back to creative ops for a moment, content has obviously been created for many years to drive Google rankings, and now we're
Yeah.
moving to answer engine optimization. So basically create your content so ChatGPT can
For the
extract the
LLMs.
answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the LLM, exactly. And then I think generative AI or generative engine optimization, create your content again to service the LLM. Technology used to work. We used to have like a 2-year lag. Technology would be built. You wouldn't really know what the
Yeah.
value was in a couple of years or 3 years. Who knew Facebook was going to be like Facebook is today? But this stuff it's happening so quickly. It's not
So
only being
quick.
deployed quickly, it's delivering utility almost immediately and value. And I think that's what's, 6 months ago, we were talking about predictive AI, which I think is something that you and I have worked with for a long time.
Yeah.
We feel very familiar with predictive AI. And then generative AI came out, a year ago? Everyone was talking about it. And then agentic AI, and then
Yeah.
now we're moving into autonomous campaigns. And, from a resource perspective, from a people perspective, again, it's concerning. I mean, how will it look in 5 years, or for our kids? I mean, I don't know, the roles that are gonna be open to them are gonna be so exceptionally different to what we can possibly comprehend today.
Yeah. I mean, the whole career path thing, right? I mean, how do you set up a career? Michelle, my wife, she works in the construction industry, and we're like, okay, that seems pretty safe for the next 10, 20 years. Maybe you'll have, like, bulldozers being, AI driven and so on, but, mega projects, I think you're still going to need people on it. But I'm thinking like software and marketing. It's like, it just feels like it's like this wave coming through. It's just so quick.
I'm a big believer that I think that AI actually creates space for more creativity. So I'm very confident that the human aspect of creativity will continue to resonate, thrive, especially amongst those individuals that are going to embrace it quicker. And you need to have, again, it's a cultural thing, isn't it? Google have got like an innovation mindset in their business, and I think if you have that, then you'll be able to deliver great levels of creativity. But yeah, we're 2 or 3 years away from all those administrative tasks in every career disappearing. I mean, business analysis as an actual career, I think, is under threat. I mean, I've got one thing I'd ask you, as a leader in a sector and also in a company. I read a Gallup poll recently, and it said 60% of executives reported insufficient digital skills amongst their senior teams, and 80% of those same leaders believe their own skills are lacking. I mean, how do you hire at the moment? Like, how do you get the leadership teams of
Yeah.
today dealing with the problems of today rather than hiring in the hope that in 2 or 3 years' time we'll have the right people at that leadership level?
I think that's why you see a lot of these CEOs go like, "Hey, these AI first notes." It feels a little bit like the COVID emails that came out, like, "Hey, we're remote now. You can buy your jeans. Don't worry about it." It feels a little bit like that, where these CEOs are going like, "Hey, AI first. Internal company emails. We could call them memos since we're in our 40s. So they write these emails internally."
40s? I mean, I'm almost at the next level up, mate.
I know, but you're still there, still there. They sort of say, okay, if there's a job opening, you got to evidence why you can't do this with AI. And we've had this discussion at a board level, and you also have the discussion of like these companies that are like 5 people and they're doing multi-million-dollar ARR. And I'm like, okay, what happens when you reach scale where your customer's sending you their MSA or their terms and conditions, and you need to incorporate that? How do you do that? You can't just push that all through ChatGPT or AI tool. So, okay, let's say you've got a job opening. Why can't it be done by AI? Okay, but who's prompting AI? Who's
Mm,
actually doing that bit? I mean, we do tons of security questionnaires and audits for
mm,
customers. We use AI for it, but sometimes it's an
mm,
online portal. No, you can't. Something you can't even copy
mhm.
and paste out of the portal. So
I know.
now you screenshot it, you can put it in, but it's still like someone's there, copy paste. There's still like these clunky bits, and I think it'll get better over time. But yeah, your question, how do we train sort of the, if you will, older generation that's used to like the tech stack that we used to? I don't know.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it's tough. I mean, I've not gotten stuck in this point where I'm using 3 different AI tools. So I'm doing like using the research in all 3 of them, and we go deep on,
Mm,
sort of future strategy of the business. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to run it through 3 different AI tools. You
mm,
get this paperback and so on. And now you're like, okay, now I'm spending a ton of time trying to incorporate the best bits of it. That
mm.
I'm struggling with. So, bit of AI fatigue that I've run into.
I mean, I can't believe I'm using it for emails now, though. I mean, I never thought
Yeah.
this is just, it's just so,
But
I
so
mean, my
good, right?
emails, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that I've just got this like colleague sitting next to me that's
Yeah.
basically telling me what I'm doing wrong.
And it's so
Although
much better at it.
I am a bit concerned that maybe I'm just taking it for granted, or I'm basically accepting almost of the guidance really without scrutinizing it. And I think, as a consultant, I think one thing that I probably get paid to do is to help my clients make decisions. But I know that the 30% of analysis that I normally would be doing that historically we would get paid for, that's gone now. That is very hard to sort of, justify the value really. So, I mean, in terms of our children, going back to the original question, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, maybe they should have become sports people, possibly, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe AI is changing that. I was at a fantastic education conference recently. You could stand in front of, this was Alan Turing actually. You could stand in front of him
Okay.
and he, ask him questions, and it was a language model sitting behind him, and he was animated, and it was all immersive. And I thought to myself, like, this is education. I mean, I'd jump out of bed if I had a
That
chance
is
to go and
really
speak
good.
to, yeah, like speak to your historical heroes.
Yeah.
But where does that leave teaching as well? And I think the impact is going to
Good point.
be so profound and significant over the next 5 to 10 years.
Did you see that video of Reid Hoffman, that Netflix CEO, where he's got his AI duplicate on a video and he's talking to this AI duplicate, his AI self? Don't know if you saw that,
No, no, I didn't
but
see that. No.
okay, I'll send it to you. It's
Yeah.
amazing, and we'll attach it in the comments as well with the video. But it's basically Reid Hoffman and himself and the AI. And I sent it to a few friends, and like, what? Why is he talking to himself? I'm like, the one's an AI, and they're like, what? And it's like, okay, describe like blitz scaling to, just summarize it in a sentence, and does a great job. And it's like, okay, describe blitz scaling to a 5-year-old. It's like, well, you're building the biggest tower. It doesn't matter how you build this tower. It's going to be a bit wonky, but it's going to be the
Mhm.
highest tower. And the quickest you can build it, it's going to be messy.
Um,
And it's like, okay, do it in Klingon. And then Reid Hoffman speaks in Klingon. And it's just like all AI generated. I don't know
I mean,
what they used for
fantastic.
it.
Yeah, I think the education sector has had its challenges anyway in terms of like trying to keep up with what the generation before my children's generation, and I think now it's even harder. And I was at just going back to creative operations for a moment and talking about like the different generations. But someone asked a question at creative. There was the campaign in-house summit last November, and the stage was basically in-house leaders, and they were asked the question, "What's your biggest challenge going into next year?" And one of the leaders basically said, "I need to get my Gen Zs to work harder." He said they are fantastic at what they do, but they work hard for 2 to 3 days and then they get tired. And that really stuck with me because I thought, post COVID, obviously, we'd be going to work like, driving for 2 hours, just get to the work, long days. And sometimes you pull all nighters quite regularly, especially in agency land. And that's work-life balance. I really encourage it, of course, has come through and it's fantastic. But, how do we get that balance so everyone can we're gonna have to change the days, the hours that we work
Yeah,
to
it's going to change.
accommodate.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you talk about the agency days. I mean, in the early software days, we'd work like through weekends, through the nights. I mean, it just doesn't happen now. You run a very simple, standard day and so on. But I feel like, yeah, I mean, now obviously with AI tools, you can get more done. But it brings me on to another topic. This asset reuse whole piece. It's really hard in creative and marketing to generate assets. We have a great case study with McDonald's in the Nordics that have, it's just it's the agency that set it up. I mean, they did like thousands of photo shoots and built like these ads and these campaigns that you can mix and match different assets. It's just amazing. But I mean, just to talk a little bit about that and what you've seen.
So asset reuse, asset repurposing. I think digital asset management solutions are more important than they ever have been because of the volume of content being
But
created.
which one? There's so many dams out there. There's so many digital asset management systems to choose from, right?
There's so many of everything. I think,
Yeah,
Scott Brinker's MarTech
that's true.
went from 12 to 15,000, like 3,000 in the last year,
Oh my
which are
word.
generally, AI-based solutions. But I think DAM actually lends itself to AI very well, and I mean, I was involved in a project last year. Well, I've been involved with the project over the last 3 or 4 years. I was working with an external consulting partner, and there was 2 products, and we'd set up a fully managed service out of India to manage the content. And so we have content managers in different areas of the world, and then a managed service in India overseeing things like, metadata, tagging, which would now be
AI,
AI led
yeah.
fundamentally, but governance and frameworks around asset usage. And actually, I would refer to it as like decoupling 2.0. So, back in the day, everyone was decoupling creative and production, which is still obviously the preferred route. But this is decoupling asset management away from the agencies, I'd say, who aren't really set up for that. They're great at creating content and producing content, but when it comes to the discipline around ingesting
Yeah.
content, it's a
That's a good
challenge.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that particular, case study, I think we had 40 to 45% asset reuse, in the way that we'd actually set it up. So again, it was never about the technology. They had multiple solutions. It was never about the dams they'd selected. They were perfectly good DAOs. But without that people structure
Yeah, managing
around
it.
them, managing it, giving individuals confidence that when they go in, they're finding the right assets, they're finding the latest asset, and they're finding assets with the right usage rights that they could reuse locally. That was extremely important. And I see that with all the asset management. I've done some I've worked on so many asset management solutions, and some have been absolute stinkers that haven't, developed in the way I would have liked.
The actual graveyard. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
there's also quite a
the
few. Yeah,
graveyard, yeah. And again,
yeah.
I think it just if you can get that change management model working effectively and find those individuals that are gonna really sort of, like, fly the flag for what you're trying to do around asset management, that'll really, really help significantly. And again, there's Kotter's 8-step change model, which is a really good one that I often use. There's also the one around, like, motivation and ability, so BJ Fogg's. I'd always recommend to anyone who's doing a deployment, have a really strong change model that you can align yourself around. But it doesn't need to be things like Six Sigma, which can be a bit
Yeah.
overwhelming, right? Go for something simple that's really human at the heart of it and is great at like allowing you to nudge people along in the journey. And I think that's extremely
No, that's great.
important.
I think
Yeah.
we'll definitely put some links to these frameworks in the comments, because I
Mm.
think even when we work with clients, it's one of the hardest things. Like, how do we manage change? So we do it in our little bubble of deploying Ziflow, but they've got a process in place. And someone was asking me, like, why is it not so easy for Ziflow just to go viral? And I'm like, well, a lot of these collaboration tools, it exponentially gets harder the more people you need to collaborate. So if you take a Loom or something like that, it's like you can record and you can send a video link and that's it. Oh, great. So your friend can do it, your colleague can do it, and so on. It's individual use. But as soon as you have tools where, like a dam, you need someone to manage the library, upload it, and then share it, and people use it, you got multiple people involved. So first it's uploading the asset, sharing it, someone needs to review. Exponentially, that virality decreases because you need multiple groups of people involved. And I find, like, as part of the change, you need an owner. Who's going to own it? Who's going to lead that?
And also, Anthony, some of these brands have got over 100 agencies.
Yeah.
And, and some of them are highly regionalized. Yeah, I think people often think, "Oh, the technology will be a silver bullet." Well, actually, it's the starting point of a great initiative, but you have to basically get your arms around that entire infrastructure and start small. Don't try and boil the ocean. Really prove the value and get that ROI model working. And it could just be on a single brand with on a single channel, for example, just focusing on packaging or just focusing on social. It really does make a fundamental difference if you put some real expertise around how to roll these types of platforms out. And even sort of point solutions like Ziflow. I know it's more than that because it's obviously got a creative project management capability and as well as approvals. But solutions like that, if you get them right, the fundamental difference they will make to an organization, going back to that one day on market, one day on the
Yeah.
shelf earlier, it always will drive a significant revenue if you can get those right. And I mean, approval solutions, I think, are one of the best ones they're probably the best starting point, actually. If you don't have one, that's a great place to start because you can get your arms around one of those solutions and everyone needs one.
I agree. I agree. So, Anil, last question for you. Sort of in 5 years, what does creative operations look like? You think it's going to change much? Obviously, AI is coming in quite heavily, but what will creative ops teams be doing differently? In 5 years from now.
Well, certainly what we're going to see in the next couple of years is a significant shift up the food chain, the value chain. So, the lower tiers of production that creative operations have historically been responsible for will either be automated or offshored. It's very unlikely that commercially it would make sense to have those sorts of tiers around. So they're going to really lean into creative strategy, into storytelling. And I think we'll see a butting of heads possibly between the creative operations teams that we see in in-house agencies and then the agencies themselves, the external agencies, as to who's going to own that brand. And I think in the UK, we're maybe a little bit further behind what's happening in the US, where I think we're seeing a lot of these in-house teams have got fantastic creative directors, executive creative directors, a really high-end creative. And in the UK, we're starting to see more of that. So AI will naturally, and automation will naturally take on that lower tier and allow them the space again to be more creative. So we'll definitely see, I think, more of that. Generative AI won't be something that people are going to be exploring. When we went through the
Yeah.
four changes, exploration will come. There'll always be a period of exploration because it'll just get better and better. But they will absolutely be grasping it in terms of not just helping them with storyboarding, but absolutely in terms of pure play creativity as well. I actually sit on the board of a creative agency as well that is totally building basically an immersive content. So imagine the Sphere in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
So, we create content like that. We've got a studio in Brooklyn. I would imagine that the creative operations teams will need to start to really think about how things have been done traditionally, traditional photo shoots and video shoots and, on-site filming, and how it's all going to move into studio. Not all of it, some of it will move into studio, and how you'll use things like Unreal, and actually rather than having to like manage multiple teams on 6 different shoots with 10 different people in different countries on location, how you'll manage
Just
that
green screen
creatively.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, within green screen, volumetric
Yeah.
walls, motion capture, all of that. And I think that move into immersive content, because that's what the consumer is expecting, is going to really move at pace over the next 2 to 3 years. And then we have to upskill our creative operations teams.
Yeah, I was saying I wasn't going to bring up the Six Nations rugby because a lot of the audience will probably not be UK, but I'm going to bring it up because the one ad I did see, there was an ad for, I think it was eToro during the Six Nations rugby, and it was clearly fully AI generated. It was like the characters were AI generated. I mean, if you watch the Six Nations rugby, Neil, you'd know this, but clearly your son was watching it. So
I would just so everyone knows, I recently beat Anthony in the Six Nations Fantasy Rugby League, and it was a joint effort between me and my son. But better luck next time, Anthony. I think.
Yeah, but this ad was fully AI generated. It wasn't like they were trying necessarily to hide it. You could see the characters were that, and it got the message through. I'm not sure how they sort of what value or how they sort of place their brand in the market, but I mean, it told a story. You knew exactly what the benefits were, and I'm sure it's a lot cheaper than doing a whole shoot.
Well, I mean, I sort of refer to that as the democratization of virtual production, which has always been sort of owned by the entertainment sector. There's some great, Society of Snow is a film that came out last year. You couldn't have done that without virtual production. But now all brands are tentatively, again, going back to those 4 stages of change, they're all moving into exploratory phase. They know they need to do it, A, for sustainability, because it's infinitely more sustainable using virtual production than shooting on location. But it also can probably reduce your costs by, well, significantly, and
Yeah,
also make you more relevant because everything's done in pre-production. So you can basically change things instantly
yeah,
to
that's true.
align around the consumer and the cultural requirements. So I think creative operations will move very quickly into that world as well and figure out how to start using technologies and skills available to create content differently to how it's been done sort of traditionally.
Yeah. Well, good luck to all of us as we navigate these changes. And Neil, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And good luck with the consulting firm, the agency, etc. Really enjoyed the time today. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and I look forward to seeing you in person and having lunch and catching up properly and
Sounds good.
discussing our kids and things like that.
Brilliant. Sounds good. Thanks, Anil. I'm sharing insights from around the marketing, tech, and operations industries on how marketing and creative teams can get more done together.